Rain tapped gently against the windows as evening settled over Portland. The sound was steady, like a quiet song that filled the lonely house. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, typing slowly on her laptop. She was trying to finish her college essay, but her thoughts kept drifting. Her mother was away on a weekend work trip, leaving her alone with her stepfather, Daniel. The house, normally full of her mother's laughter and movement, now felt silent and too large. Emma wasn't uncomfortable living with Daniel, but she didn't really know how to act around him. He had married her mother 3 years ago, and though he was kind and thoughtful, she had never gotten close to him. He wasn't overbearing. If anything, he was quiet, careful, the kind of man who thought twice before speaking. She respected that, but it also made her unsure, like she was always standing at a polite distance from him. She rubbed her eyes and sighed. Her essay about coping with change felt ironic. Her whole life had been about change new schools, her parents' divorce, her mother's remarriage. She wanted to write something honest, but her thoughts were messy. She put on her headphones, letting a soft piano playlist fill her ears. The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the streetlights into hazy orbs through her window. She was deep in thought when the door suddenly opened. She flinched. Daniel stood there, holding a mug. "Oh, Emma, sorry," he said quickly, realizing his mistake. "I should have knocked." Her heart skipped. She pulled off her headphones. "It's okay," she said, though her voice was shaky. Daniel looked genuinely apologetic. "I didn't mean to startle you," he added, stepping just inside the doorway. "Your mom told me you like hot cocoa when it rains. I made some and thought you might want one." Emma blinked, a little surprised. "Oh, thank you," she said softly. He crossed the room and set the mug on her desk. Steam rose from it, carrying the sweet smell of chocolate. He gave her a small, awkward smile. "I'll remember to knock next time," he said gently. She nodded, watching him turn and close the door behind him. The moment lasted only seconds, but it stayed with her. She looked at the door, then at the cocoa. Her chest felt tight, though she couldn't say why. She took a sip. It was warm and perfectly sweet, just the way she liked it. She smiled to herself, but then frowned. Why did something so simple make her heart race? Maybe it was because she wasn't used to this kind of quiet care. Her real father had never done small things like that. He'd been loud, charming, full of promises that faded when he left. Daniel was the opposite, steady, predictable. The kind of man who didn't need attention to show kindness. She put the cup down and stared at her reflection in the dark window. She could see her own face faintly against the gray sky. The house creaked softly as the rain continued to fall. Somewhere downstairs, Daniel was probably reading or watching TV. Everything was normal. Yet something about that small moment him walking in, the look on his face, made her feel off balance. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Hannah. "You surviving the weekend with stepdad?" Emma smiled. "Yeah, he's nice. Just quiet," Anna replied with a joking emoji. "Quiet guys are the hardest to read. Be careful, LO." Emma rolled her eyes but typed back, "It's fine. He's just being polite." Still, after she sent it, she couldn't focus again. She tried writing a new paragraph but ended up deleting the same sentence 5 times. She lay back on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of Daniel standing in the doorway wouldn't leave her mind the way he'd looked, embarrassed but kind. Like he was trying to do something right and ended up making things strange instead. Maybe she was reading too much into it. Maybe she was just tired. She got up and turned off the light, letting the soft street glow filter into her room. The rain's rhythm was soothing. She curled under her blanket and closed her eyes. But her thoughts kept circling. Downstairs, Daniel sat on the couch with the TV remote in his hand. He hadn't turned it on. The house felt empty without his wife there. And he had thought offering Emma cocoa might make the evening less lonely for both of them. But when he saw the look of surprise on her face, guilt washed over him. He hadn't wanted her to feel uncomfortable. He'd only meant to be kind. He sighed and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Emma was a good kid, smart, independent, but guarded. She rarely talked about her feelings, and he didn't blame her. Stepfamily dynamics were always complicated. Still, part of him wished she could see that he cared not as a replacement father, But as someone who wanted peace in this house, upstairs, Emma stirred in bed. The sound of Daniel's footsteps moving in the kitchen made her feel oddly safe, even though she couldn't explain why. It reminded her that she wasn't completely alone. She wanted to text her mom goodnight, but decided against it. Her mother was probably busy, and besides, there was nothing wrong. Still, her mind replayed the moment, the open door, the warm cocoa, his quiet apology. She told herself it meant nothing, but a faint unease lingered and awareness that something had shifted. Even if she didn't know what, the rain softened to a drizzle, and soon the house fell into complete stillness. Emma finally drifted to sleep with the cup still on her desk, the last of the cocoa cooling in it. Later that night, Daniel checked the locks before going to bed. As he walked past Emma's door, he paused for a second. Light from the hallway spilled softly across the floor beneath it. He thought of knocking to say goodnight properly, but decided against it. She was probably asleep, and he didn't want to disturb her again. He turned off the light and went to his room. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the living room clock. In her sleep, Emma dreamed she was standing by a door that kept opening and closing on its own. She tried to shut it, but the handle kept slipping from her hand. When she woke, the dream faded, but the feeling stayed. She sat up slowly, the gray light of early morning filling her room. The cup of cocoa sat cold on her desk, and she smiled faintly when she saw it. It was such a small gesture, but it had changed something inside her, like a stone dropped in still water. It wasn't love, and it wasn't fear. It was simply awareness of how fragile human closeness can be, and how even quiet kindness can stir emotions we don't yet understand. And though the day began like any other, Emma knew one thing for sure: that small moment, the door opening, the look on his face, the warmth of the cocoa, was something she wouldn't easily forget. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains, cutting thin lines across the wooden floor. The rain had stopped, and the world outside looked washed clean, bright, still, and almost peaceful. Emma sat up slowly, blinking against the light. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then the scent of cocoa reminded her. The cup from last night still sat on her desk, a faint chocolate ring marking where it had cooled. The memory of Daniel walking in flashed in her mind again, and that same uneasy feeling stirred inside her chest. She got up, brushed her hair, and headed downstairs. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the kitchen. Daniel was already there, wearing a light blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, reading the newspaper. He looked up when she entered. "Morning," he said, smiling softly. "Sleep okay?" Emma nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Yeah, thanks for the cocoa last night." He chuckled lightly. "You're welcome. Sorry again for barging in. I'll try to remember to knock next time." "It's fine," she said quickly, sitting down at the table. Her tone was casual, but her mind was anything but calm. She could feel his presence more than usual. Every movement he made, the sound of his fork on the plate, the way his voice filled the quiet kitchen felt magnified somehow. He served her pancakes and poured orange juice into a glass. "You've got that big essay due today, right?" She nodded. "Yeah, I'm almost done." "That's good. You've been working hard," he said. "Your mom would be proud." The mention of her mother made the air shift slightly. Emma's mother had been calling home every night, cheerful as always, talking about meetings and long days. But the house didn't feel the same without her. Emma hadn't realized until now how much she relied on her mom's energy to keep everything balanced. Without it, she felt exposed. They ate in silence for a few moments. Then Daniel put down his coffee cup and spoke quietly. "Emma, I just want to say Agane didn't mean to make you uncomfortable yesterday. I wasn't thinking. I should have knocked first." His tone was gentle, serious. He wasn't defensive, just honest. Emma looked up from her plate, caught off guard by his sincerity. "It's okay," she said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Still should have been more careful," he insisted, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Boundaries matter, even at home. That word boundaries stuck with her. It was true. They lived in the same house, shared meals, but there were invisible lines neither had ever crossed. Yet lately, it felt like those lines were shifting without either of them meaning to. She looked at him quietly, noticing how tired he looked, how his eyes softened when he smiled. He wasn't a bad man. He'd been patient through her teenage moods, never forced closeness, never tried to take her father's place. Maybe that was why she suddenly felt guilty for feeling so tense around him. "I know you're trying to be kind," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "And I appreciate it. It's just, I'm not used to it." He frowned slightly. "Not used to what?" "Someone paying attention," she admitted, almost whispering. "Most people just let me handle things on my own." Daniel looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's fair," he said softly. "But you don't always have to do everything alone. You know?" The conversation ended there, but it left something behind, a strange mix of warmth and awareness that neither could ignore. Later that afternoon, Emma sat by the window in her room, laptop open, pretending to write. But her thoughts kept drifting back to breakfast. Daniel's words had stayed with her. He had a calm way of speaking that made everything sound like advice instead of judgment. It reminded her of the father she wished she'd had. She remembered being 12, sitting alone at a school play, waiting for her dad to show up. He never did. Her mom had arrived late, tired but smiling, saying he'd forgotten again. That was the night she decided she wouldn't rely on anyone too much. Maybe that's why Daniel's small gestures, like a mug of cocoa, felt so heavy. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Daniel appeared at the door, this time knocking first. "Hey," he said. "I'm heading to the store. You need anything?" "No, I'm good." "Thanks," she said. He nodded and smiled. "All right. I'll be back in an hour." When he left, the silence in the house returned. Emma tried to focus, but her heart felt unsettled. It wasn't attraction, it was confusion. She didn't understand why she was so aware of his kindness lately, or why she kept replaying his words. Maybe it was just because her mom wasn't home, and he was the only other heartbeat in the house an hour later. Daniel returned with groceries and a small surprise bag of chocolate cookies from her favorite bakery. "Thought you could use a break from studying," he said as he handed it to her. She smiled, surprised again. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." The evening passed quietly after that. They ate dinner together while the news played in the background. The conversations were simple about college, weather, weekend plans, but something in the air had changed. There was comfort in the familiarity, but also a tension neither wanted to admit. After dinner, Emma helped with dishes. Daniel washed while she dried. Their hands brushed once over a plate, and both of them froze for half a second before pretending it hadn't happened. She laughed awkwardly. "You're not bad at this," she said, trying to lighten the moment. He smiled, looking relieved. "Years of practice. Your mom says I'm slow, though." "She's not wrong," Emma teased, and they both laughed softly. The tension eased, but only for a while. When they finished, Daniel wiped his hands on a towel. "You should get some rest," he said. "Big day tomorrow." She nodded, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become again. Good night, Emma." As she went upstairs, she thought about the way he'd said her name. Not unusual, not inappropriate, just careful, like he wanted her to know he respected her space. Still, her chest tightened with a feeling she couldn't define. She sat on her bed, staring out the window at the dark sky. The streetlights glowed softly, and she could see Daniel's shadow moving in the living room downstairs. He was probably reading again or maybe watching one of his documentaries. She didn't know why, but she wanted to go downstairs to talk, maybe laugh about something random. But she stayed where she was. For the first time, she realized how complicated simple kindness could be. It could comfort, but it could also confuse, and sometimes without anyone meaning to. A line could blur not because of wrong intentions, but because two lonely people were trying to feel seen. When Emma finally lay down to sleep, she felt calm but thoughtful. The awkwardness of the previous night had softened into something gentler, understanding. She knew Daniel hadn't done anything wrong. He was just trying to be there. But still, that quiet, unspoken moment between them lingered delicate and uncertain, like a half-remembered dream. And as the night deepened, both of them, in separate rooms, thought the same thing. Sometimes the hardest part of living under one roof isn't the distance. It's the closeness you don't know how to handle. The sky turned gray again that evening, heavy clouds rolling in over Portland like thick smoke. The sound of distant thunder echoed across the quiet neighborhood as raindrops began to fall, soft at first, then harder. Emma sat at her desk, the glow from her lamp lighting the pages of her notes. She tried to focus on finishing her essay, but her thoughts kept drifting again to Daniel, to their conversation at breakfast. To the way he'd said boundaries matter, the words had settled deep in her mind. She respected him for saying that. He didn't ignore the awkwardness between them. He faced it gently, maturely. It made her see him differently, not just as her stepfather, but as a decent man who cared enough to keep things right. Yet, the more she respected him, the more her emotions tangled into something she didn't understand. The lights flickered once. Then again, the next second, they went out completely. The house fell into darkness, the rain thundering louder against the windows. "Great," she muttered under her breath. Downstairs, she heard Daniel's voice. "Emma, you okay up there?" "Yeah," she called back. "Power's out." "I'll grab some candles," he said. A few minutes later, she came down the stairs, using her phone's flashlight to guide her way. The air smelled like rain and candle wax. Daniel stood in the living room, lighting a candle on the coffee table. The small flame cast a warm glow across the room, dancing shadows on the walls. "Looks like we're stuck like this for a while," he said with a grin. Emma laughed softly. "So much for finishing my essay. You'll survive one night without Wi-Fi," he teased. She sat on the couch across from him, wrapping herself in a blanket. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming steadily against the roof. The candlelight flickered between them, soft and golden. It made the space feel smaller, cozier. They talked for a while about random things. Her college plans, his work, her mom's trip. Daniel was easy to talk to when the world slowed down like this. He had a calm energy, the kind that made her feel safe. At one point, lightning flashed outside, lighting the whole room for a split second. Emma jumped slightly, and Daniel smiled. "You never liked storms, huh?" "Not really," she admitted. "When I was little, I used to hide under the blankets until it passed." He chuckled. "You can still do that. I won't judge," she smiled, the moment light and easy. But under that laughter, there was something else, a quiet awareness neither of them spoke about. It wasn't attraction or anything forbidden. It was just closeness. A simple, human connection between two people who'd been lonely in their own ways. Another loud thunderclap shook the windows. The candle wavered. Emma sighed. "You know, it's strange. The house feels bigger when Mom's gone, but tonight it doesn't feel empty." Daniel looked at her, thoughtful. "Maybe that's because you're not alone in it." Their eyes met across the flickering light. For a brief second, the silence felt heavier than the storm outside. Then Daniel looked away, smiling faintly. "Your mom called earlier," he said, changing the subject. "She'll be back tomorrow evening." Emma nodded. "That's good." She tried to sound casual, but something inside her tightened. She wasn't sure why hearing that made her feel. Disappointed, the rain slowed for a moment, just long enough to make the house feel still again. Daniel leaned back on the couch, arms crossed loosely, watching the candle flame. "You know," he said softly, "I think your mom worries about you too much. You've grown into a strong, independent woman. She should be proud." Emma blushed slightly at the compliment. "Thanks. But she worries because she's my mom. It's what moms do." He nodded. "Yeah, still, she's lucky to have you." That simple sentence made her chest warm. There was no hidden meaning, no strange undertone, just kindness. Still, it lingered longer than it should have. The rain started again, a little harder this time. A gust of wind rattled the front door, and Daniel got up to check the lock. Emma followed him, more out of instinct than worry. The air was cool, the scent of rain drifting in through a small crack in the window. "Everything's fine," he said, turning the lock firmly. "Good. she said quietly, stepping back. Her shoulder brushed his arm by accident. It wasn't much, just a light touch, but it made her heart skip. She stepped away quickly, embarrassed. Sorry. He smiled gently. Don't be. You're fine. They both laughed softly, the tension dissolving into the sound of rain. Daniel went back to the couch and she sat again too. Pulling the blanket around her shoulders for a while, they just sat in silence. The only sounds were thunder and rain. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel spoke. You remind me of your mom when she was your age. Emma turned to him. Really? He nodded. Same determination. Same spark. She used to stay up late working on projects, drinking way too much coffee. You're both unstoppable when you care about something. Emma smiled, her heart softening. She says you helped her believe in herself again after the divorce. Daniel looked down, his expression thoughtful. She helped me too. We both needed a reason to start over. His voice carried quiet emotion, the kind that came from old pain. Emma felt it. To an understanding of how broken people sometimes found each other and built something new. For a moment, she wanted to say something comforting, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just said softly, You've been good for her? He looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. And she's been good for me. Their eyes met again, the candlelight soft between them. The air felt fragile, as if one wrong word could break it. Then thunder rolled again, and the moment passed. Daniel stood. You should get some sleep. Power might come back soon. Emma nodded, though she wasn't tired. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Emma. She went upstairs, her steps slow, her mind racing. She paused at her door, looking back down the hall. She could still see the faint glow of candlelight from the living room. It made the house feel safe again, even with the storm outside dot in her room. She sat on her bed, staring at her reflection in the window. Her heart felt strange light and heavy at the same time. Nothing had happened, not really, but she couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. Not in a wrong way, but in a deeply human one. Downstairs, Daniel blew out the candle, leaving only the sound of rain. As he walked past her room, he hesitated for a second, listening. When he heard the quiet rhythm of her moving around, he smiled faintly to himself, not out of anything improper. But because he was glad she wasn't afraid of the storm anymore, he went to bed, unaware that Emma was lying awake, thinking about everything, the thunder, the conversation, the warmth of candlelight, and how complicated kindness could sometimes feel. Outside, the storm rolled farther away, leaving behind a quiet house full of emotions that neither of them could name. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and golden after the storm. The world outside looked washed in new clean streets, shining leaves, and a peaceful silence that only came after a night of rain. Emma woke up slowly, the sound of birds mixing with a faint hum of power returning. Her lamp flickered back to life, and she smiled slightly. The storm was over. She sat up in bed, stretching. The air still smelled faintly like rain. For a moment, she just sat there, thinking about the night before. The candlelight, the storm, Daniel's calm voice, all of it replayed in her mind like a quiet movie. Nothing wrong had happened, yet it had felt strangely intimate. Like they had shared something deeper than words. She shook her head lightly, trying to clear her thoughts. Don't overthink, she whispered to herself. It was just a storm. Downstairs, she heard the faint clatter of dishes. Daniel was already up. She brushed her hair, threw on a light sweater, and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast, warm and comforting. Daniel stood by the counter, flipping pancakes with easy precision. He looked relaxed, back to his usual calm self. Morning, she said softly. He looked up and smiled. Morning, Emma, sleep well. Yeah, she said, though it wasn't entirely true. She hadn't slept much, her mind too full of thoughts. Still, she didn't want him to know that. He poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. Power's back, so that's a win. Emma smiled, wrapping her hands around the cup. The warmth felt grounding. You make good coffee, she said. Years of practice, he replied lightly. Your mom can't survive without it. They both laughed, and the sound felt easy again. For a moment, Things felt normal, almost like the previous night had been nothing but a dream. But as they sat there eating breakfast, something lingered in the air. Not tension, exactly, but awareness. Both of them seemed careful with their words, their gestures. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was quiet, thoughtful. After a while, Daniel spoke. "Your mom's flight lands around 6, he said. She texted me this morning. She's excited to come home." "That's good," Emma said, smiling. "She'll be happy to see you, honey," he added with a warm look. "You've been keeping the house running better than I have." She blushed slightly and looked down at her plate. "I just did what needed to be done." He nodded. "You did it well. You always do." There was sincerity in his tone that touched her heart. She didn't know why, but his words carried weight. Maybe it was because she rarely heard compliments that sounded that genuine. After breakfast, Daniel went to his office to catch up on some work, and Emma went to the garden to get some fresh air. The air was crisp, the grass damp beneath her shoes. The sun shone through the clouds, lighting tiny droplets that clung to the leaves. Everything felt alive again. She sat on the small wooden bench by the rose bushes, her mother's favorite spot. It was peaceful there. She thought about her mom, about how much she'd been through, and how Daniel had helped her heal. That realization filled Emma with both gratitude and a kind of quiet admiration. She wasn't confused anymore. What she had felt the night before wasn't romantic longing, it was appreciation, connection, and understanding between two people who cared about the same person. She had simply seen Daniel's kindness clearly for the first time, and it had touched her deeply. While she was lost in thought, Daniel stepped outside. "You found the quiet spot, huh?" he said, smiling. She nodded. "It's peaceful here." He joined her on the bench, sitting a few inches away. "Your mom loves this garden. She says it reminds her of a fresh start." Emma looked at the flowers. "She's right. Everything here feels like it survived something." Daniel nodded. "Just like us." The words hung softly between them. He didn't mean it in a strange way, just truthfully. They had both survived loneliness, loss, and change. And now, somehow, they were part of something steady. Emma turned to him. "I'm glad you married her," she said quietly. "You make her happy. I can see it." He looked surprised for a moment, then smiled gently. "That means a lot, Emma. I try." "Your mom deserves happiness." "She does," Emma said. "And so do you." For a few seconds, they just sat there listening to the birds. The sun broke through the last clouds, lighting the garden in gold. It was one of those rare, calm mornings that felt like closure, like everything had found its place again. A car horn sounded faintly in the distance, and Daniel glanced at his watch. "I should probably head to the store before your mom gets back. She'll want her favorite dinner ready." Emma smiled. "Want me to help?" "Sure," he said. Teamwork never hurts. They spent the next few hours cleaning the house, fixing little things, and laughing about small mistakes. The mood was light again, natural. By the time evening came, everything looked perfect. When they finally heard the sound of the garage door, Emma felt her heart lift. Her mom's voice filled the house, cheerful and warm. "I'm home." Daniel went to greet her first, and Emma followed. Her mom dropped her bags and hugged both of them tightly. "I missed you two so much," she said. "We missed you too," Daniel replied, his tone soft and genuine. Emma smiled, feeling something inside her settle. The awkwardness, the confusion, the strange emotions from the storm, they all melted away in that moment. The house felt whole again. Later that night, after dinner, Emma stood by her bedroom window, looking out at the dark sky. The stars were visible again, clear and bright. She thought about how easily things could be misunderstood, how emotions could twist under loneliness or silence, but how love, in its truest form, wasn't about confusion or boundaries. It was about care, respect, and quiet understanding. Daniel passed by her door, pausing briefly. "Good night, Emma," he said gently. She turned and smiled. "Good night, Daniel, and thank you." He looked at her, puzzled. "For what?" "For being there," she said simply. He nodded. "Always." When he walked away, Emma felt peaceful. The world outside was calm, her heart steady. She lay down, closed her eyes, and smiled. The storm had come and gone, not just in the sky, but in her heart too. What remained was clarity, trust, and a quiet sense of belonging. That night, the rain returned softly, but it wasn't frightening anymore. It was just the sound of life, continuing, gentle, familiar, and full of meaning.